Hey guys, this is Scott. Welcome back to Church Tech Talks. Hey, today we are going to dive more into the DP48. I just got a new update for it, so they've got some new features that are really awesome. Can't wait to show them to you. I'm going to play back some live tracks. We're going to listen to some recordings, some actual mixes on the unit, and answer some of the questions that you guys have had, some questions I've had, and I've got a lot planned, so let's get right into it. Okay, first things first, they came out with some new updates. I know last time I didn't quite get to show you how the update works on the Hub 4, so I wanted to cover that right now. So we're gonna go ahead and open the firmware updater. And now that we have that updater open, the next thing we wanna do is just take a USB cable and we're gonna plug in our Hub 4. I have one right here in front of me ready to go. Plug that in there. And you'll plug the USB into the back of your Mac. All right, so now that we've got that done, I'm gonna flip that Hub 4 back around. And we're gonna turn this unit on while we press the number 1 button. That's gonna be putting it into this update mode. All right, now that that is in our update mode, let's go back to the Mac and we're going to select our firmware. So the way we do it is we just click this folder icon, and I've got the firmware on my desktop right here, Midas Hub 4 2.0. And after a few seconds, it'll just start automatically doing that update. You're gonna see those 2 indicator lights flashing on the Hub 4, and your app is going to give you a percentage countdown until it's done. At the end, it'll say update complete. So we can just click OK, and boom, our Hub 4 is updated. That easy. All right, so now that we got the Hub 4 updated, I'm gonna go ahead and update our DP48s. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug the SD card into the back of the Mac here. Remember, that's 32 gig max size SD cards. There was some comments on my last video that you could possibly do more than that if you kind of configure these SD cards in other ways. I'm not sure, it may be possible, but what I found is 32 gig is the max size. All right, so now that we've got the SD card in our Mac, let's go ahead and load that file on here. Now, what you're gonna wanna make sure is you put it in the DP48M folder. If you don't do that, the DP48 won't see the file. I'm used to putting it in the root folder because that's how it works on the M32, the X32 console. It's looking for it in the root, but this works a bit differently. It has to be in that DP48M folder. Also, if you don't have that folder, you can format these cards right on the DP48 in the setup menu, but you may also just be able to manually put a DP48M folder in there. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it should work. All right, so let's go ahead and eject this, and I'm gonna plug in power and that SD card into our unit. There's our power. There's our SD card. And the way we're gonna get this to update is we're gonna power it on, we're gonna hold that setup button. It's gonna put it in bootloader mode and it'll start that update. And boom, we are on beta 2.7. Now, the first thing you're gonna notice in this beta is that they actually just redid the home screen. I am very excited about this change because they added a feature that I requested, and it's going to make mixing on this thing so much easier. What they did is they made the home screen show all 12 buses, and on that screen, you'll see this later, but you have the group names and you have a meter. So instead of having to make labels like we have to make every single week for the P16s, those labels are gonna be right there on them, ready to go. They're named groups, and not only that, now you can select from preset names in the unit itself, which you couldn't do before. Those are huge usability features that they added to this thing that I'm really excited for. All right, so I've got 3 more of these things to update, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll jump up on stage with some tracks. All right, so I updated all the DP48s. I obviously updated the hub. I got it all set back up, and I realized that I had updated some of my Waves plugins to version 11, which Multirack didn't like. So I started filming the first half of this video on a Thursday, and I had a problem and wasn't able to load a lot of my plugins. Had to hop on the phone with Waves, and so now it's Tuesday morning. I'm finishing up the video. Somehow, strangely, I'm wearing the exact same thing. I'm not sure how that happened. That was pure luck, but we're gonna continue on now. All right, so here you can see I've got tracks live pulled up with some files from our Easter service. I've got Waves multi-rack there. I am putting these two together using this little program right here called Jack Pilot. If you haven't seen my video on that, check it out. I'll link up top. Jack Router is an awesome way to get multi-rack working with playback if you want to do virtual sound check, to dial in your Waves plugins. It's pretty awesome, so check that video out. All right, so we got all that running. I've got our M32 here set up. We have a DL32 on AES50A, and on B, we're coming out over here into one of our DP48 units. And then from this, we're going back into our amp room, and we're going into the hub 4 and then feeding all the other DP48 units on the stage. This works awesome because you can use this as the master to control all the DP48s on stage. And the way you do that is pretty simple. You just hit setup, and what you're going to do is you are going to scroll down until you get to this area right here where it says remote. What you're going to do is you're going to turn that on. Right now, this is your master unit. So if we select that, we can go scroll and control any of the units on our hub 4. So let's say I want to control device ID 2. I'm just going to select that one. And now my mix is that DP48 that I want to control on stage. And the other cool thing about this is if I plug in, I can actually listen to that mix right here. I just plug into either mix A or mix B. I can listen to it. If the musician's saying, hey, something's wrong with my mix, I can just pull it up, check it out, fix it for them right from front of house. All right, so I am going to go ahead and load up a preset. To get to presets, you double click those buttons. I'm going to load one, and I have a preset saved right here on 11. I'm going to load that in. What I did there on preset 11 is I set all of our groups to 0 dBs, and I'm actually going to switch this real quick before we continue on. Switch this back to master, turn remote off, and I'm going to go set the mixer mode to single. That's going to make it all the user interface just a little bit easier to track along with. So what I did on this preset is, if you notice, you have a group level, group pan, you have group compression and group reverb, as well as on your mix, you have a limiter and a reverb on there. So one thing I noticed about the broadcast is that it does not control any of these settings. So what I wanted to do is basically set all of these to unity. So reverb's off on all the groups, comp is at 0%, EQ's flat, pan is right up center. So the reason this is so important to have a preset that assigns your groups and basically unities all those controls is because the broadcast feature on the M32 does not touch any of those. So if you had a musician that was using this, you use the broadcast feature to kind of get it in the ballpark, then that musician's going to go in there and tweak. They're going to change their group volumes, they're going to change their reverbs, their compressions, all that. And then when you have another musician and you go to broadcast again, it's not going to change that. Now, I'm hopeful, and it's possible that Music Group is going to change that so that when you do broadcast, it kind of unities all of those settings, which will give them a more consistent mix. So it's possible that they're going to update and do that, but right now this is kind of how it's functioning. All right, so we're now at the M32. I'm going to go to library and I'm going to tab over to AES50. This is where we do all of our broadcasting for our DP48s. And it's fairly simple to figure out how this works. You've got your banks, your output banks, AES50 output banks right there. And what you can see is the output banks are set to out 1 to 8, out 9 to 16, out 1 to 8, out 9 to 16, P16 1 to 8, and P16 9 to 16. This is pretty typical of when you first get it, and you actually need to go fix your routing for your AES-B output banks. I have it set to B because that's how we're doing this. We're running it out of AES50B, but if you're doing it on A, you'd want to do your output banks on A. Because I'm using a stage box, I want to use B because I don't want to mess up my first 16 outputs on that DL32. I want those to stay the same so that my 16 outs here aren't affected. So let's go to AES50B outputs. And currently this is kind of going to be the factory, how it's set up. If I'm doing this live, I'm going to want it to be AES50A 1 to 8, and I'm going to continue doing, 9 to 16, 17 to 24. And then on this one, I would do card 25 to 32 because our last 8 comes from waves. And then I'm going to leave these two as P16, and I'll explain that in a little bit. If you're doing this from local, you're going to want to do all your local ins. If you're doing all from waves, you're going to want all of them to be card. And if you're doing virtual sound check, you're also going to want all of these to be coming from your card. So I'm going to set them up like that. So this is going to give you all 32 of those inputs going out of your AES50. So right now what you want to do is basically just set up your channels. So I know, for instance, that my first 8 channels are all drums, and you can actually see the names of your channels here. But the problem is this is all before any of the channel processing, because it's coming right off of, if you're using a stage box, it's coming right off the preamp of the stage box. If you're using an M32 local or X32 local inputs, it's coming right off the local inputs. It's not getting any of that channel strip processing. So the way to fix that for some of this stuff is to use those P16 outs. So you can see here, that's why I left P16s down here, because what we have is we have a mix bus right here on 1 and 2 for drums, and then we send the kick as well to the P16s. So I can give all 3 of those, and then in your DP48, you'll be able to have processed drums. Now for drums, this is super important because you need that channel processing to make them sound pretty good. For other instruments, it's not so bad, and sometimes vocalists prefer no processing on stuff like that. So you can use kind of a mix and match, whatever suits you. You can assign it right there. So that is what we would do for our drums, and then I can just go in here and name this. I'm not very good at this new layout, but I do like the auto selections here. All right, so now we've named that drums. So just as a proof of concept, I'm gonna go ahead and broadcast. Before you broadcast, you wanna make sure to go into setup, and you're gonna wanna make sure that the remote is on here. So then we're gonna go ahead and broadcast. Yes, and voila, we've got our drums. And if we go into that group, we can see that it is assigned those 3 inputs for us. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get this whole thing set up for us and broadcast, and I will do a super fast speed to save you guys time. All right, so I've got most of these set now. Like I said, you can use the P16s to do processing before you send stuff to the DP48. One thing we like to do is obviously drums, like I said, but the other thing we like to do is reverbs, so that when our sound engineer mutes the reverbs in the house, it also mutes the verb in their ears. Now, the DP48 does have reverb built in, but it is on all the time. There's no way to mute it. So you can maybe add a little bit, but if you add a lot, then it's gonna start to sound really, really bad if your vocalist is talking. There's gonna be a lot of reverb in it. So I am gonna use the P16s to do that, and I'll show you how right now. So we're gonna go ahead and go to routing, and then we're gonna slide over to our P16 routing, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this choir bus that we had set up on 9 and 10, and I'm gonna change that to the direct out of FX1L, and we're gonna make that pre-fader plus mute, and then we're gonna do FX1R, again, pre-fader plus mute. Now we can go back to our DP48, and I've set up this reverb channel, and I can go to the P16s here, 9 to 16, and we put it on channel 9, channel 10. All right, so now we are ready to broadcast. So we've got our DP48 here that is blank and ready to receive some broadcasted information. We got all of our groups named. We've got all of the assignments done. We can choose the scope, so we can do group name, group assign, and this is the coolest part here, channel level and channel pan. Now what this is gonna do is it's going to take your channel level and your pan from your main mix on your console, and it's gonna send it to your DP48. It's a great starting point. So I know that I've got my mix right here set up pretty decently, and I'll go ahead and play this and pull it up in the house. It's playing now, so let's go ahead and pull that up in the house. that's good to go. I can turn the DCAs down and still broadcast. That's not gonna affect it. It's just gonna take those channel levels, channel pans, send them to the DP48. So I'm broadcasting to B. I'm gonna go ahead and click broadcast, yes. And now you'll notice all of our things are named and all of the groups are assigned. That's a great starting point for us. All right, so I got the DP48 propped up so you can see it a little bit better. I'm gonna turn this down at first and then I'm gonna record this audio so I can play it back for you guys. There we go, we are now recording. So I'm gonna play these tracks back, and what I wanna do is bring these tracks up and just show you how good of a mix it is just straight from broadcasting. We haven't mixed it on this unit at all, remember that. So this is just purely a broadcast mix. Now that's pretty dang close. So obviously you're gonna wanna make changes here. For instance, you're gonna wanna set your group. So let's say I am, electric guitar here. So I'm gonna wanna hold mix A and then press 4 to kind of assign that. It was already assigned there. So I wanna press 4 to make sure that is my group, that it's gonna get there. So let's go ahead and turn up and listen again, and I'll kind of dial in what I would do for a mix. Now, obviously this is gonna change depending on what you want, but I'll show you kind of how you can improve the mix once you get to this point and how quickly it is to get to the mix you want once you have a broadcast set up.
Everybody began to breathe out of
So you kind of heard the tail end of that reverb there. So we got a lot of reverb on that main vocal. Now I just did it on the unit itself just to show kind of what that reverb sounds like on this Faith's vocal. So this is a really, I mean, I was pretty in the ballpark there of what I'd want my mix to sound like. I might go in and kind of mess with maybe a limiter. I could do some more EQs on guitars and stuff like that. I don't know if you noticed, but they changed some of the assignment things. So like in keys, if you go to assign, what you'll notice is that these are light blue. And then if I go and assign like, you know, percussion here, that's a dark blue. That's to denote that these are stereo linked. And you can assign individual ones, but if you hold it down, then it makes it stereo linked, and that'll just automatically pan it wide left and right. So you can do panning not super wide, but you would just select each one of these individually to be in there. Then you go back to your edit window of that group, and then you can do your panning if you want it. Maybe, you know, maybe you want your panning slightly off there. So that would be a way to do, oops, I did that again. That would be a way to do like a slightly more right stereo pan. But for the most part, if you have a stereo channel, you're probably just going to want it stereo linked. That's going to automatically pan it left and right pretty hard. And you'll see too, when you go into the group mode, you don't have control of pan anymore once it's in stereo. Also, you may have noticed that if you want to solo something in your mix, just pressing and holding will solo that channel. Let's go check out how that limiter sounds, because I actually haven't listened to that yet.
Everybody began to breathe out of the silence. The roaring lion declared the grave.
Now, to me, that still, as with the P16s, I don't really like the limiters on these at all. I normally just turn them all the way up, which is off. And that's what I would do here. Now, something interesting on the mix, they also have reverb. I was confused by this. And what I figured out was that if you have reverb on, let's say you have reverb on, you know, vocal 1. Well, as soon as you turn the reverb on the main all the way down, it doesn't matter how much reverb you have on your vocal 1, your group. So let's say, you know, let's go back to Faith, because I had reverb on her. It doesn't matter if I turn that reverb all the way up on here, which is plus 20 dBs. If I have reverb set to off over here, which is right there, then I'm not going to have reverb on Faith's vocal. This is kind of the master level for your reverb. So I don't know why they have this. They really don't need it. They should kind of just leave it at unity and then just hide it from the user. We'll see if they do end up doing that, but I would just leave it right there, 0 dBs. So you're at unity there. And then whenever you apply a reverb to your vocal, it's going to come through, and all of these numbers will be consistent across the boards. That way, you know, if you like, you know, plus 10 on your vocal when you're singing, you're going to like plus 10 every time you play, versus if this is set high or low by the previous musician, you're never going to know what you actually like. You just kind of have to turn and guess. I haven't touched on the EQ, so let's look at that real quick for this. So to get to the EQ, just hit one of these buttons. So low, we can go ahead and maybe boost everything below, you know, 50. We'll probably do a mid cut right around, yeah, it looks like 400 is the closest to what I'd want. So we can do a mid cut right around there. And then we can kind of do, maybe we do like a little shelf here. Let's try that. Let's see how that sounds.
You have broken every chain. This sound.
Now that compression's a little extreme.
You have broken every chain. This salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living.
Now that sounds pretty decent for the raw signals, but the problem is you don't have individual EQ on everything. You've got kind of one group EQ. You also don't have any gating, and you don't have individual compression on each signal. So that kind of messes things up a little bit, versus, let's go ahead and set this back to 0. Actually, I can just broadcast again. So let's rebroadcast this signal, and let's set our comp to 0. Let's go clear out our EQ changes we made here. And let's listen to those drums again.
You have broken every chain. This salvation
So that's obviously going to be the route you want to go with some inputs and outputs. But for instance, if I'm a singer, I might not want any of that processing. I might want the raw vocal sound. But if I'm an electric guitarist, having that processing on the vocal is really nice. So the cool thing about the broadcast is it's a good starting point, but it's not where you have to stop there. So if I'm, let's say I'm the electric guitarist and I want, let's go back to Faith's vocal. Maybe I want Faith's vocal to be the processed signal. So here's Faith as the unprocessed. Go ahead and flatten her out on comp and reverb, and then let's listen to what that sounds like.
You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name.
All right, now let's go listen to our processed vocal. So go in here to assign. We're going to remove that. We want to go to the P16s, which is going to have the processing on her. Listen to that.
You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ.
Now it obviously got a little bit louder there, so we can go in and adjust that and just bring that volume down.
You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope.
Now we're doing a lot of processing in waves with this. We got a de-esser, we've got an F6, we got some R-comp, CLA2A, SSL EQ, a PSE, which is going to help with a lot of the bleed. Now that's going to clean up my mix as an electric guitarist immensely. It's going to keep her vocal pretty in the mix without her ever getting buried, even during the quiet parts, but it's going to sound a lot better than that raw signal. But as a vocalist, it might be a little too much compression. It might be, the PSE might throw her off something. She might not feel like she has enough dynamics. So really, that's going to be dependent on the musician, what they want. But in general, what I would do is I would send your drums mixed with all the effects, and then pretty much everything else I'd send right off your input, right off that AES 50 signal, unless the musician specifies that he or she wants something different, then you can kind of fix it for them. All right, guys, well, that's going to be it for this video. There is so much about the DP48s. I kind of had a difficult time narrowing down exactly what I wanted to cover because there's just so much you can do with these things. And I feel like I maybe barely scratched the surface, but hopefully I gave you guys some helpful info. Maybe you guys are deciding if you want to purchase the DP48, and hopefully this video was helpful. My first impression of the DP48 was that actually it was going to be very difficult for a lot of musicians to use because it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of stuff to it. Us tech guys can kind of ignore that sometimes. One thing though I will say is that this broadcast feature that I showed you today, I think it's going to be massively helpful. As we saw, you can get a really good mix really quickly just by broadcasting what's on the console. Your front of house engineers already got, hopefully, a good mix for the house. Why not just use that as a starting point for everyone? Now, I think that's going to be what most of you should do, probably what most of you will do when you get this DP48, is come up with some type of system where right at the beginning of practice, right after sound check, you broadcast the console's mix to all the DP48s, and that's going to get all of your musicians in a really great starting point, and they may only have a few things to do at that point to get their mix to sound just how they want it. Now, your mileage may vary. Some musicians are probably going to want really funky things like vocals panned super wide or only their stuff up super loud, and that's just going to happen. But this is at least going to get them all the group names, all the group assignments, and if they want it, a good starter mix. If I didn't cover something and you want to see it, let me know, and I will work on including it in my next video of the DP48s. And make sure you like and subscribe this video, and let me know in the comments. All right, guys, take care.